She would have been awesome. A doctor or a lawyer or a politician. At 10:22 a.m. on the morning of September 15th, 1963, some 200 church members were in the building, many attending Sunday school classes before the start of the 11 a.m. service, when the bomb detonated on the church's east side, spraying mortar and bricks from the front of the church and caving its interior walls. Most parishioners were able to evacuate the building as it filled with smoke, but the bodies of 4 young girls, 14-year-old Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Weasley, Carol Robertson, and 11-year-old Denise McNair, were found beneath the rubble in the basement restroom. 10-year-old Sarah Collins, who was also in the restroom at the time of the explosion, lost her right eye, and more than 20 other people were injured in the blast. I was in the ladies' lounge when the bomb went off. I remember Cynthia, Denise, and Carol walking inside the lounge area and went into where the stalls was. So when they came out, Denise passed by Addie and asked my sister to tie the sash on her dress, and I was across from them at the sink. And when Denise asked her to tie the sash, and I was looking at her when she began to tie it, and all of a sudden, boom, I never did finish tying it. So all I could do was call out, Jesus, because I didn't know what that loud sound was. And then I called my sister, Addie, 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 and she didn't answer me. So I thought that the girls had run on the other side of the church where the Sunday school area was. But all of a sudden I heard a voice outside saying, someone bombed the 16th Street Church, and it was so clear to me. Many members of the KKK were suspected for the bombing, but no charges were filed at first because of the lack of physical evidence. Eventually, Robert Chamberlain, a retired auto mechanic and former KKK member, was convicted when his niece testified that he had said to her that he had enough stuff put away to flatten half of Birmingham. He died in prison. Herman Frank Cash was a suspect, but died without even being convicted. After the case being opened to the FBI, they convicted Bobby Frank Cherry and Thomas Blanton. Cherry dies in prison. After the bombing, riots broke out everywhere, and 2 African American boys are killed. Alabama Governor George Wallace sends out 500 National Guardsmen and 300 state troopers to the city, and the next day 500 police officers and 150 sheriff deputies joined them. As the state of Alabama is falling apart, President John F. Kennedy responds by saying, if these cruel and tragic events can only awaken the city and state, if they can only awaken this entire nation to a realization of the folly of radical injustice and hatred and violence, then it is not too late for all conquered to reunite in steps towards peaceful progress before more lives are lost. Dr. Martin Luther King held a press conference in Birmingham to speak on the bombing. He is quoted to have said that the U.S. Army ought to come to Birmingham and take over the entire city and run it. Although this happened many years ago, terrorist attacks have been a problem today, but towards Muslim Americans. Discrimination against Muslim Americans has increased throughout the 2000s. Everyone remembers September 11th, 2001, when the World Trade Center was struck by 2 planes and destroyed. The Pentagon in Washington, D.C. was also struck, but only a portion was hit. After all this chaos, we learned it was the doing of a Muslim terrorist group, Al-Qaeda. Since 2001, people have become very weary of Muslims, with the only reason being their religion. Many people fear flying whenever they see a Muslim in an airport and depict every Muslim as a terrorist. Terrorism comes from all races, all genders, and religion, not just Islam. After the 13 years passed since 9/11, only 27% of Americans have a positive view on Muslims. Dictionary.com defines terrorism as someone who terrorizes or frightens others. Nowhere in this does it say Muslims, does it say white, does it say African Americans. People automatically assume that Muslims are terrorists. Muslims are not the only terrorists. Terrorists can be in your backyard.